The Love Triangle. Second chapter. A few months went by. Jules had given up on me and was dating a guy I thought was pretty decent. She seemed comfortable with him and stayed with him almost every weekend and a few weekdays. I figured it was only a matter of time before she moved out again. She met him when she was showing him the house. He had gone through a difficult divorce a few years before, and when he had the opportunity, he moved out. Bonnie was Bonnie, warm and loving, but I noticed her staring off into space more and more often. She often spent nights at the joint with Jules. Will and his current wife were now part of our social circle. He and Annette had reconciled, but their daughter refused to acknowledge him, calling Jason Daddy every chance she got when Will was around. It was Jason and Annette's turn to have a weekend away. Everything was going great. The food was delicious, the company was great, and the booze was plentiful. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but someone said we should get in the hot tub. Problem was, no one had brought their suits. Jules grinned and took off her top, leaving her in shorts and a peach bra. She twirled around a bit, while her boyfriend laughed and slid into the tub. He dropped his shorts and shirt, leaving him in just his panties. Who wears those anyway? Soon Will and his new wife entered. He stripped down to his silk boxers, and she stripped down to her bra and thong. Annette and Jason came in next, followed by Booger and Jenny, and then it was just Bonnie and me. She was wearing a beautiful sundress with nothing on underneath. She swayed slightly, slowly unbuttoning the dress until it came undone and a puddle spilled out onto the deck. She was definitely agitated. The other girls and guys applauded, and soon a pile of bras was forming on the sidelines. I shook myself off and joined them. We all sat and laughed, relaxing and having a good time. The girls asked for another round of drinks, and Jason and I headed to the bar, mixing and preparing drinks until we had poison for everyone. A few minutes passed, and I noticed that while we were gone, there had been a shuffle at the bar. Bonnie ended up on one side of Will, Jules on the other. The only empty seat was next to Will's wife. I frowned more and more, and just as I got to the tub, the jets turned off. Almost everyone was completely unclothed. Bonnie looked up, giggling, and turned white when she saw the look on my face. Fuck it! I threw the drinks into the tub, grabbed Will's head and pressed it against one of the jets. People screamed, and Jason grabbed me. He fell face first into the tub. I grabbed my clothes and got out, ignoring the screams and calls as I made my way to the car. People were just coming out of the front door when I stopped. I noticed that Bonnie still hadn't gotten out. My phone rang almost immediately. I remembered that Bonnie, Jules, and I had the same phone plan, and one of the features was a location app. We had hooked it up mostly for Jules because she had real estate, and we could tell where the other was at a glance. I stopped and took the battery out, disconnecting everything. Now they'd find me like hell. I didn't want to be found, so I went to the beach, which was 2.5 hours away. I was only wearing soaked shorts and a t-shirt, so I stopped by the supermarket and bought a pair of boxers, 2 shorts, 2 pairs of jeans, and 3 t-shirts. I also bought a new pair of sneakers and a few pairs of socks. I changed clothes at the store, stuffing everything into a small bag. A few miles from the beach, I found a pretty decent place, a small independent motel that wasn't connected to anything. For 3 days, I thought, drank a little, and learned to fish off the pier. Bonnie knew I didn't like the beach and didn't think to look for it. I went to a beach we had never visited and found that I liked it. I used ATMs twice on the way out of town and withdrew the maximum amount, so I paid cash for almost everything. I took a lot of time and thought it over carefully. There were too many warning signs. Individually, they meant nothing, but put together they painted a portrait of deception. Something stank, and it wasn't the old shrimp I was using as bait. On the 4th day, I headed home wondering if I had another one. There was no one there except my daughter Joy, left behind, no doubt to guard the house in case I showed up. She greeted me with a big hug, but was somewhat reserved. You know I was supposed to call if you showed up. I don't know what happened, but Mom and Aunt Julie are furious. They've had a few spats in the last couple days, something about a failed plan and an unexpected reaction, but they're not sharing anything. If I had to guess, Mom did something monstrously stupid, and Aunt Julie was in on it. That's where it ends. She grinned. As I expected soon. So, should I call or not? Go ahead. You can tell them I still look incredibly pissed off, and they might want to go soft because it's true. Tell them that if they come in with guns drawn, it might be the last shot of their lives." Joy stepped back, her eyes widening. "Daddy, are we going to have to split the vacation? I want my little girl to know both grandparents, not separately." I kissed her cheek. "No guarantees, baby. It doesn't change the way I feel about you, and it never will. Where is she? It would probably make me feel a lot better if I was holding something innocent and pure in my arms." "She's dozing, but it's about time she woke up. I'll call her." Soon I was lying in my favorite rocker, marveling at the purity of my new life. She was old enough to pay attention to her surroundings, and everything was a wonder to her. I heard the door open, but I didn't look up. Joy left, saying we had to take the baby for the weekend so she and her husband could resume their romantic relationship. I laughed and said that was too much information, but suggested she make the most of it. Finally, they cleared their throats, and I looked up. They looked like they hadn't slept well, and that pleased me a little. Jules spoke first. "Where's Joy?" "Left to rekindle an affair with her husband." That shot made them flinch. "Honey, we need to talk." I smirked at Bonnie, but there was no mirth in my smile. "You got that right. Before you start, there's something I need to know. It's important, and if I catch you in a lie, our marriage is over. Don't try to get away with it. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Just tell me the truth. Was what happened in the hot tub planned?" A silence ensued that practically gave me the answer I needed. "That's the way it was." "No, well, not really." Jules spoke, and I focused on her. "Then what exactly was it?" "Well, we were talking about reliving the past. Just joking around, you know?" Then Will and Grace began to share their experiences, talking about the excitement of their new lovers and how it had made their marriage stronger. Jason talked about some of the things he'd done while he was in the band, and Annette admitted that she'd been in a relationship with a guy that involved a bit of a switch. So all of our friends are the same people. Strange that I never noticed that, but that still doesn't explain the hot tub. We were having a good time, you know? Everyone was a little looser, and the flirting got more and more intense as the night went on. You were in a really good mood, so Jules and I talked about it in the bathroom and decided it was a good time to push the boundaries and see how you took it. Bonnie stopped, and Jules took the banner. "That was just fun, honey. We didn't expect it to go this far. You seemed comfortable, and when you went out to get drinks, Will suggested we go further, so it went from there." "Well then, what did my reaction show you?" "We miscalculated a lot. We had to pass Will mouth to mouth. He's really pissed at you." Bonnie looked like she was a little disappointed in me. "My heart bleeds for him. Tell him I look forward to seeing him again, and we can discuss this like adults." "Is this code for beating the crap out of him?" "We'll find out when I see him again, won't we, Jules? Now, Bonnie, what do you want to do about the divorce?" Bonnie went very, very pale, and Jules pressed her hand to her mouth. "Divorce? Are you out of your mind?" "Okay, I'm a little out of my mind. I've never done anything like this before, and it wasn't a big deal. I'll never do anything like that again if it means my marriage." "I noticed you didn't say you wouldn't do it again because you think it's a bad idea. This is your only chance, Bonnie. Tell me the truth. Why do you want to switch?" She hung her head and spoke so quietly, I almost couldn't hear her. "You guys had a lot of partners and experience. I sometimes yearn when Annette and Jules talk about the old days. I've never experienced anything like that. You know you were my first and only lover." "Who's to blame? I seem to remember you sliding across the floor like the rest of us. Why didn't you do something about it then? If you needed the experience, then it was about time you did something about it." "I was afraid. Then you became such a wonderful lover that I forgot about it. But it was always there, hidden deep." "I love our life together, darling, but I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to experience something like what you had just once. I think if I could do it just once, I could get rid of it." I sighed. "You know, when we did the shuffle, we were all young and unattached to each other. Now we've come full circle. Most of us have kids older than we were then. We've built a life based on certain principles. Are you willing to destroy all of that for the satisfaction of a desire? What if things don't work out the way you'd like, ties are broken, and new relationships are formed? Will we start exchanging favorites all the time? What if one of us says no, that he's had enough? Will his partner be able to continue the relationship without the other? No, it's only going to be one time, honey. I swear. You swore to give up all the others, but now you want to renegotiate. What about diseases? When we did this the first time, no one had heard of AIDS, herpes, or chlamydia. Do you really think it's a good idea to risk everyone's health for a little physical satisfaction? We all went through testing and presented the results to the others before we started work. Really? What about the other night? If I hadn't slowed down, you all would have spent the evening together. Jules blushed. We've been tested before. The whole group? Bonnie replied. Yes. I was so angry I was having trouble breathing. Let me get this straight. You coordinated everything up until the moment you took the tests? And this is after you told me it was unplanned and just happened. You know, I think back to that night, and I can't help but wonder why you were so heavy on the booze. If it had gone any further, I would have been out of my depth. Was I supposed to just watch while everyone else enjoyed themselves? That's cold. Not even, honey. I already told them you were clean, and I had the paper at home to prove it. I just forgot to bring it. I looked at her and couldn't believe that I had once thought I knew this woman. So you were going to start this grand adventure with a lie, betraying everyone else's trust? How do you know that everyone else's results weren't tampered with, or the old results weren't altered in some way? How can I trust anyone now? I need to step away for an hour or so to try to think this through. Don't follow me, don't call me, just leave me alone, and I promise I'll be back tonight. I handed the baby to Jules and walked out the door. Bonnie tried to hug me, but when she looked me in the eye, she pulled back. In retrospect, it wasn't the best idea to go to the neighborhood pub we'd all frequented for years. I talked to a few people, then grabbed my beer and sat in the darkest corner. People soon realized I wasn't in a talkative mood and left me alone. That was until Jason and Booger showed up. I could see them from my table, and I wondered if they were just there for a beer, or if they were on a mission. All thoughts of it being a coincidence faded away as they stood for a moment, scanning the room and heading towards me. Mind if we sit down? If I did? Before you do, look me in the eye and tell me who sent you. Jason blushed. No one sent us. Jules and Bonnie called us and said you were back and we could probably find you here. We decided to come by and talk. First of all, I have to apologize. Jules and Bonnie led us to believe that you were okay with our little plan. You caught us off guard when you lost your temper. I take it you're not interested? Absolutely not. But Bonnie can't wait, so she'll probably join without me. Tell Will that if I find out she's been gambling, I'll divorce her and name all of you in the lawsuit. I'm not settling for a quiet settlement or mediation. I want this to come out. I want it to be made public. It might be worth considering that this is an attachment alienation state, and one case just settled for $1.2 million. We're all pretty well off. Think about that for a minute. Jason turned a little pale and looked like he wanted to be anywhere in the world, but where he was now. Booger just kept walking forward. Will says, "You think I care what Will says? God, is he really that charismatic? He won't have to worry about girls. If you keep doing what you're doing right now, you say Will says one more time and I'll punch you right in the mouth." God damn it. Listen to me for a fucking minute, okay? Will says, "I've been going to this bar for over 20 years, and this was the first time I got kicked out. Tom, the owner, escorted me out himself. Damn it, boy. What the hell happened back there? I've known you since you were 10 years old, and that's the first time I've ever seen you hit a guy. I'm sorry, Tom. My life seems to have turned into a series of first meetings. Can I call you to get some bail money?" He laughed. It had been our standing joke ever since I turned 16. I was about to do something stupid, but he stopped me. "Kid, if you keep this up, you're going to go to jail. If you do and you need bail, call me." "Will you come and get me?" He laughed. "Fuck no. You got yourself into whatever you got locked up for, and you can find your way out. But call me, I'll give you a good laugh." Tom clapped me on the back and told me to be sure to come to the darts tournament on Saturday. I stood there with Jason and Booger. Booger was holding a towel to his face to stop the bleeding. "You knocked the toe out of my typhoid." Of course, because of the swelling and the towel pressed to his mouth, his speech was slurred, but I got the gist of it. Be glad we were sitting, Booger. If we'd been standing, I'd have knocked them out. Jason held out his hand. Are we okay? Not even remotely. I need you all to stay away from me for a while. I think it's for the best. Both girls waited for my return, looking scared to death. I can't believe you hit Booger. I would have preferred it to be Will, but you have to work with what you have. I'm going to bed. It was several hours before Bonnie slipped quietly into our bed. She lay there for a while, and then tentatively reached out and touched my arm. I love you, sweetie. I just lay there, watching her steady breathing. She knew I was awake, but she was smart enough not to say anything. When I finally woke up, she was practically lying on top of me. I didn't pay much attention to it. She'd been sleeping like that since we'd first been in bed together. I exhaled, trying not to wake her, and went to take a shower. When I came out, she was gone, and delicious smells wafted through the house. I could hear them talking quietly. I wondered, then wondered shamefully, if they were up to something new and didn't want me to hear. They froze when I walked in, shock reflected on their faces as I kissed one and then the other. Good morning, girls. What are you having for breakfast? This must be how a king feels, I thought, as they piled on top of each other serving breakfast. I kept the conversation light, sticking to neutral topics like joy and our new granddaughter. Finally, they started to relax as I started talking to them about what I was thinking about. I don't want to hear anything more about the past. I still can't accept that my wife wants to spend her evenings with other people. Before you get upset, Bonnie, that's just the way it is. You said yourself that there are no feelings. It's just a chance to experience what a man is like, which means it's an evening in the roughest way possible. Besides, we'll be staying away from all your potential exchange partners for a while. Each of you have been plotting behind my back, and I'm not at all thrilled about it. I don't care if you understand or think it's right. If you don't want to follow the program, just tell me, and we'll have Jerry start the paperwork. Both women turned pale. Jerry, Geraldine for short, was our attorney. She practiced almost exclusively business law, but there were those in her firm who specialized in family law. I always thought that title was an oxymoron. Where's the family if you're contributing to its disintegration? 3 months of uneasy truce followed. Jules moved out for a while, living with her boyfriend, but after 2 months, she came back. I never asked, and she never said, but I knew how she behaved, and the romance was over. Bonnie bounced around the shadows for about 3 weeks before we found our way back to each other. By the time Jules moved in with us, we were almost back to normal. Our social life was a little limited because the only person in our company I talked to was Jason, and Bonnie knew better than to meet him alone. About 6 weeks after the hot tub incident, I received an email on my business website. Jason was tired of renting a studio and wanted to build his own. He needed about 2,500 square feet for a studio, with offices and editing rooms on the top floor. It was a nearly $1 million project, and he wanted me to build it. I understand if you say no. It's just that until what happened, you were my closest friend. Earl always talked about what a stand-up guy you were, but I thought he was a bullshitter until I got to know you better. Besides, you're one of the most reliable builders in the state. If you do this, I'll be sure it'll be done right. We won't even have to see each other. Think about it. For a week I did, and then one evening I showed up at his door. Annette answered and her jaw dropped. I grinned at her reaction. Hey, Net, is Jason here? They both hugged me so tightly that I felt a little uneasy, but then I remembered why I'd been avoiding them and tensed up. But after sitting at their kitchen table for a while and sipping a couple beers, I remembered that they had been my friends for a long time. It's not for me to judge them. We talked for 2 hours, mostly about the project. I made a lot of notes on my laptop, told Jason that I only knew the architect, and would ask him to draw the plans. He hadn't found a place to build yet, and I advised him to ask Jules to look for one. After all, that's what she was doing. After we finished our business, we sat in silence for a while. Finally, I broke it with one word. Why? Annette took the lead. Bonnie has always been the baby of the group. We all went through a lot when she came into your lives. She knew what we were doing back then, but we were just kids. And once you got serious, you stayed loyal to her. She knows that, Grunt. But when we got together and talked about the wild times, she had no idea what it was like. Wait a minute. I never talked about those times in general terms. I didn't think it would be respectful to Bonnie. She sighed. Not you or any of the guys. It always came up when it was just us girls and we were drinking wine. Maybe we exaggerated a little, but not much. You were a stud back then, honey. Tanned and muscular, with unruly hair and a slow smile. You were also considerate of all of us, and didn't hesitate if any of us needed protection. She stopped smirking. You know what? Of all the guys in our circle, you and Jason are the only ones in good shape. You still have muscle, and the gray in your hair makes you look pretty damn nice. I doubt any of us thought we'd ever get to the state we're in now. Then Will came back, and he brought Grace. I think we've all lived their stories. Will started to press her. Grace was around, showing off, distracting the guys. Then they'd have an exchange. She'd talk to us, and he'd tell the guys what an adventure it would be. And it would be safe. We would stick to just us, be discreet, and never say anything unnecessary. He said the group they left behind had been around for 20 years. At first it was just nonsense, but the seed was laid. Then we started discussing how we would do it and when we could do it. We discussed health, and again Will said we should always have a rule calling for clean health. Then, even though it wasn't openly discussed, the planning began. Everybody knew except you. Will said that you would be the hardest to deal with and we should bring you up to the idea. Then came the night in the hot tub. We were all tipsy, and when we took off our clothes, you seemed amused by what we were doing, and we decided to go for it, to go as far as we could. If Jason hadn't accidentally unplugged the tub and the jets hadn't stopped, who knows where that would have led. But it happened, and it was too much, too soon. I seriously thought you were going to drown Will. Jason had bruises for weeks. Jason joined in. In hindsight, we realize it was wrong to set you up like that. I wanted to be upfront from the beginning, but Will talked about how well he knows you, and it was better to make it easy on you. I just stared at them until they started moving awkwardly. Have you done anything yet? No. Will insisted on doing without you by letting Bonnie in, but she quickly quashed that thought. That would be cheating, and I will never have an affair behind my husband's back. He has to be with us, all or nothing. I can still see the fire in her eyes. It made Will fixate on her, but other than that conversation the day after you left, she hasn't spoken to him or any of us until recently. We still have wine parties and the subject keeps coming up. Does Bonnie still want to go forward? Annette lowered her gaze to the kitchen table, swirling her wine glass. I'm sorry, Grunt, but it does. It's tearing her apart. She says it'll only be one time, and then it'll be over. Then, when we all talk, we'll have memories in common. We're all getting older, honey. She wants to do it before menopause, while she still feels attractive. I stood up. I'm going to go home. You've given me a lot of food for thought. I feel like I need to talk to everyone who wants to participate one-on-one, to try to get the big picture, with everyone except Will or his wife. I still feel they tried to stab me in the back, and I want nothing to do with them. I'll have Jules look for a place that suits your needs, Jason. I came home and told Jules about the project, asking her to keep an eye on it. Jason spread the word, and I started getting visitors to my office. Everyone knew that I usually did my paperwork just before the end of the day, and that's when they came. John. Jules' boyfriend came in first. Even though Jules had moved back home, they still saw each other. I'd never interacted with him that much, but it only took me 5 minutes to realize he had no backbone whatsoever. What's more, he seemed quite submissive. Maybe that was why she'd kept him around. But Jules gravitated toward confident men, and he had a limited shelf life, I realized. He was almost pathetic in his eagerness to tell me what he thought I wanted to hear, and I immediately dismissed almost everything he said. I did ask him a few questions, though. You were already married, right? He nodded. Why aren't you now? He took a minute trying to figure out how to phrase it. We started out very well. Then, after about 4 years, we started drifting apart. Then she had girls' nights out with her friends, and after about 5 months, she came home smirking. It was a little ruffled, and I noticed it was missing a sleeve. I'm not going to lie to you. I met a guy, we had a drink, he was cute, and the first thing you know, we ended up in a motel. I loved it. If we stay together, you'll have to get used to me playing every now and then, but I'll always come home and act as discreet as possible. If you still love me, take me to bed right now. I'm still worked up, and it would be the perfect ending to a perfect evening. What did you do? I spent the evening with her. She was a wild woman. It was probably the best night of my life. She apologized the next day, but 2 weeks later, she went out on a date. She always insisted we spend the evening as soon as she got home. Finally, after 6 months, she just didn't come home. By then, I was tired of the whole mess, so I happily agreed to the divorce. It may have hurt him, but I was pretty frank. It seems to me that you have a taste for humiliation and sloppy seconds. Is that your way of surviving your marriage? If so, I have to say it won't end well, especially with Jules. She needs a confident man, and you're not that man, Bubba. Honestly, I think the only reason she's still dating you is so she can have a partner when the exchange starts. Your expiration date is approaching very quickly. Most guys would have been furious. He just sighed. That was pretty much the end of the conversation. Then I talked to Jules, invited her to lunch without Bonnie, got takeout, drove to the site and set up in the picnic area. Jules, are you sure about this? I know what we've done in the past, but it was just a bunch of kids goofing around. Back then, no one was related to anyone. Now we're mostly married and our connections go back decades. Is it really worth it to mess up a relationship? Possibly beyond recognition? She spoke as if she had thought it over carefully. I had my doubts at first, but I'm not taking that risk like most of you. We both know John will never be a life partner, so if we do split up, it's going to happen anyway. Who doesn't want to relive their glory days? Plus, if I do this, I'll have a chance to look out for you guys. Honestly, when it comes down to it, Bonnie might back out. If that happens, I'll be your way out. If she decides to back out, she won't need an exit strategy. We'll just up and leave. I don't think anyone will be stupid enough to try and stop us. If I do hurt their feelings, I certainly won't lose sleep over it. We talked some more, but eventually got repetitive and we changed the subject. Since we shared a moment, I asked her what she thought was wrong with her marriages. The first one was just a total loser, but I was too in love with him to notice. He reminded me a little of you at first. When his true nature started to shine through, I realized I had made a big mistake. Did you know that one of our worst fights was because of you? I was somewhat discouraged by this. Why would you fight over me? He had just lost his third job and was whining when I finally lost it. I got tired of listening to his excuses, so I told him to be courageous. I used you as an example and he couldn't take it. This man never went to college. I have a master's degree in business. Grumpy is the perfect nickname for him because that's all he is and ever will be. She grinned at the memory. I lit him up. Yes, I told him. He's just a high school graduate working in construction. However, this man had never lost a job in his life. Every time he changed employers, they begged him to stay. He grudgingly took a job with his own company, owns a beautiful home, and has a wonderful family. What a loser. Let's see. You have a master's degree. You've been fired 3 times and quit once, just before you got the axe for incompetence. We can barely afford to rent this apartment, can't afford to have kids, and our cars are old and barely run. Yes, education will always beat hard work, don't you agree? Now Jules laughed. I thought he was going to explode. He even pulled back to hit me. I told him to try it, that I was a better man than him on my worst day, and I was ready to prove it. Instead of hitting me, he just stormed off. 2 weeks later, I filed a lawsuit. Jules replaced her smile with a frown. Derek was different. He worked hard, tried to succeed. He even had a 5-year plan, like the Chinese did at the beginning of communism. It turned out to be about the same. He hid everything well, and it wasn't until we'd been married 6 months that the cracks started to show. The problem with his plan was that it wasn't his plan. I believed that marriage should be a partnership, and he believed that a woman should be submissive and stay at home. When I disagreed, he would get violent. He wasn't afraid to hit a woman and then threaten her if she didn't comply. I was shocked. Why didn't you call me? She grinned. You would have killed him. No, I handled it my way. I waited until he was asleep and then I put a brick in his sweatshirt and wrapped him in blankets. I beat him half to death. It took him a few minutes to get out of the blankets, and by then I had already beaten the anger out of him. The final blow came on his balls. I bet he flew 6 inches off the ground and was cold by the time he landed. I packed up what I wanted and was heading back to his place to knock again when he stirred. After I left, he probably wasn't in the mood for love for quite some time. Can you believe he had the nerve to call the police? They came and questioned me. I showed them my bruises, black eye, and busted lip, and told them I didn't start the fight. I just finished it. They refused to arrest me. I found out later that his balls were so bruised they almost took one. They should have taken both. He would have been much calmer, like a bull, instead of a pretend bull. Damn, Jules, your taste in men sucks. Have you never met the right mister? Her eyes clouded over for a moment. Yes, but I was very young and gave it away. I've always regretted it. Besides, for that matter, there's one man I've always wanted to try. And no, you won't know who it is. I hope you have enough love in your heart to let Bonnie fulfill her fantasy, because I'm afraid she'll do it without you, and we both know how that could end. Would you hold me for a little while? We sat at the table until dusk, until she snuggled up against it, and watched the birds flitting around the feeders I had built and hung. Then I talked to Jenny, again at our establishment, but this time inside. I made Booger wait in the car. I poured her a white wine, which I knew she preferred, and waited until she had a second glass before asking, "Do you really agree with that?" She said yes, but it came out very weakly. "I don't believe you. I think Booger was messing with you. Jenny, you're 10 years younger than Bonnie, and before you, she was the youngest in the group. You're an attractive woman, and I can't help but lust after you. You'll be very popular if this happens. Every man will want a hot new girl like that. Can you live with that?" The harshness of my words hurt her, so I continued. "It won't be love, Jenny. It will be lust. Crude, insensitive, mind-blowing. Will you be able to look at yourself in the mirror the next morning and not feel shame? Will you ever be able to look at your husband in the same light again, knowing that he made you do it? This is about your body. Do you think Booger will care how you feel as long as he gets his? He won't. Not for a while. When the rush of lust wears off, the doubts will come. Then he'll do what we all do every time we get together. We'll look at each other and wonder if our wives think we're better lovers, and the wives will watch each other like hawks, analyzing every word and action, wondering if their husbands have any feelings for you. It will turn into a vicious cycle that has no good ending." She was already crying profusely, but she didn't resist as I hugged her, telling her how much I had always admired her as a person. Finally, she stopped crying and started hiccuping, and then she grinned. "You don't waste many words, do you, Grunt? I've been thinking the same thing, I just haven't had the courage to articulate it. I'll really have to think about it. Booger won't be pleased." "Booger doesn't need to live with you, but you do." She smiled and tried to flirt. "Are you really going to turn down the chance to be a young, hot new girl?" "If it ever happens, I'll beat everyone else to death to get to you first. Count on it." She chuckled. "If we do, I'll make sure you're the first. Or maybe you'll be the last. We'll just close the door and spend the night getting to know each other better." "Go away! You're making my mood rise at the thought of it. Seriously, Jen, be true to yourself first." She stood up and surprised the hell out of me by giving me a hot kiss. Then she pulled away, giggled again, and staggered toward the door. She stopped right in front of the door, looked over her shoulder, and winked. She slowly spun around a few times, giving me an attentive look, then took the dress and unlocked the door. "This is just an example of what could be yours. I won't talk about anything, and his imagination will run wild. By the way, he hates it when you call him Booger. Would you like me to send him over?" "I don't care what he thinks. I don't need to talk to him. Everyone knows perfectly well what he thinks of Ida. You're too good for him, Jenny. I hope you realize that before it's too late." Just as I didn't need to talk to Booger, I didn't need to talk to Will or his wife. They were the ones who originated the idea. I talked to Jason. He grinned and said he'd spent enough years in the rock and roll lifestyle to know what he was getting into. And Annette lived with a guy who was into that sort of thing, so she was okay with it. "Do you really think it won't ruin a friendship?" "Maybe. That's why Annette and I decided I wouldn't take turns with Bonnie. I want to be able to look you in the eye. I believe you, but a penny for a pound. If I go, Bonnie will be fair game, and I'll never hold a grudge against you." He grinned. "Well then, I agree. Everything will be fine, Grunt, as long as everyone maintains control." I agreed, wondering how a bunch of people with free passes and lots of alcohol could maintain control. There was a late addition, or rather two. Vicky and Rhonda, two girls who had hung out with us when we were younger, were still good friends of Annette's. One night after a few drinks, she let them know she wanted to join in. None of us knew it at the time, but they were already lovers then. When they showed up, I asked them if they expected the men to leave them alone. God, I hope not. That would make no sense to us. We're not fanatics about it. We like to spend time like this from time to time. Don't forget you've been with both of us. It'll just be fun for us. A few nights like this, and then we'll go back to our lives. We'll use this night to fuel fantasies for years to come. Let us in, baby. We can handle it. Don't tell me you wouldn't like to get your hands on them again. Rhonda remained thin. Vicky had gained maybe 30 pounds. They laughed at the look on my face as Rhonda helped her pull her top over. She took her time. They kissed my cheeks and promised me many more if they were invited. I thought about everything I discussed with the players for a long time. I even did a little research on the internet. Everything I learned depressed me even more. From what I learned, swingers made up less than 1% of adult couples, and half of them divorced soon after starting this lifestyle. Those who did it just once did better, but within 3 years of doing it, half of those couples were divorced. Bonnie was extremely attentive, but I could see that she was trembling at the thought of us having to move on. Jules wisely held her own. One evening, once we had eaten dinner, I looked at them. "I'll do it." A collective sigh echoed in the hall, and Bonnie finally asked, "What do we do, sweetheart?" "Exchange, just once and never discuss again when we're done, and I'll have terms." Bonnie threw herself into my lap, followed by Jules. Then they pulled me close to them. "To hell with the dishes. Come on, honey. We're going to give you a little test." The girls were shocked to the core when I said no. No. Remember, I said this is for once, and I meant it. This is going to last. We need to focus on logistics. I do not want to be in the same room where my wife is spending the evening with someone not me. I don't think I can live up to that sight. And it can't be someone's house. Everything has to happen on neutral territory. Again, I don't want to go to someone's house and remember the sounds of the evening echoing in my head. There are a couple other things I'm going to need, and they are absolutely non-negotiable. If you can't live with that, I'll wish you luck, and we'll try to part as painlessly as possible. Jules and Bonnie stared at me. Bonnie looked a little panicked. "Damn, Grunt, you're sucking all the fun out of me." "I don't think it's going to be that much fun. I'm just trying to minimize the impact it will have on all of us. Just so you know, in talking with the rest of your little group, I've discovered one pattern. In almost every case, there is one partner who likes the idea much more than the other. And some couples have no warm and fuzzy feelings toward the idea at all. I predict at least 2 divorces in less than a year." "Why do you keep referring to your friends as my band?" "Well, Bonnie, it wasn't my group. I wasn't privy to any of the discussions, planning, plotting, and manipulation that went on. You all conspired behind my back, and real friends would never do that. I'm beginning to doubt if I even knew them at all." I sighed. "Or you." There was no hot evening that night, not with anyone. It took 3 weeks before they came up with an acceptable plan. We talked a little, but everyone was under strict orders never to mention it in my presence. Several times, I noticed Will looking at me, a smug smirk appearing on his face. I wondered if that smirk would remain after he found out what I was up to. We were going to a resort, somewhere in a hot climate where the beaches were clothing free. I suspect that was the girls' plan for the night. We were going to spend 3 nights there. The first was for couples only, the second was a big event, and the third was a time of recovery and reunion. I hoped. We were leaving on Thursday. On Friday, I gave Bonnie the final terms. She didn't know where we were going until we pulled into the parking lot. "Why are we here? Does Jerry have business papers we need to sign?" Something like that. Jerry greeted us, not knowing what to think about what I needed. I asked if they were ready, and she handed me a stack of papers. She then led us into a small conference room and closed the door. Bonnie looked very nervous. "What's that?" "Fail-safes. They're pretty simple. Read them, think about them for a while, and then tell me if you agree. If not, then it's cancelled, and you must never mention it again. I'll give you some privacy." I knew it would take her a long time, and I hadn't had lunch yet, so I went into a neighborhood store and picked up one of their famous Reubens. I was surprised that I was able to eat. 45 minutes later, I walked back in. She started to work and put her phone back in her purse. I grinned, thinking that there might be some disappointed people here now. Her tone was accusatory. "You seem to think it won't work out between us. Don't you have any faith in me at all?" "Not as much as me. When a man's wife tells him she wants to spend the evening with other men, it kind of undermines your confidence. I don't feel like I'm asking for anything unreasonable. I'm basically just putting in writing what you promised. Jerry says it's very unusual, but perfectly legal. Think of it as a contract, because if you don't fulfill your promise, it stays in effect without any negotiation. If you keep your promises, nothing bad will happen. Is there any doubt? The papers were a contract that included a post-nuptial agreement. We'd never entered into a prenup because we'd had nothing from the beginning, and I'd never had any reason to doubt her. Legalities aside, the paperwork only stated that we both agreed to one night with different partners, never repeated or discussed. At any time after that event, and the agreement was signed, if anyone spent the evening with anyone other than their married partner, the divorce would be immediate. The cheater would receive 35% of the assets, and the faithful would receive 65%. The divorce was uncontested, and if the losing partner still decided to try, he or she would lose another 10%. On that last section, I absolutely insisted. Bonnie could never, ever enter into a relationship with one Will Fortner. If she had, she would have been served papers. Furthermore, it stated that he could not attend the upcoming event. He was the one who was tearing my world apart, and I saw no reason to let him capitalize on the situation. I hoped that would be enough for the group to cancel the whole thing. He'll be beyond furious. He's the one who started all this and pretty much planned it all. The others, I'm sure, won't be thrilled. Is this really necessary? Bonnie, look me in the eye and tell me you want this marriage to last. You get your fantasy, so I expect some sweat from you. If you can't, well, let's move on to plan B. I had hoped that common sense would prevail, but apparently lust takes over common sense more often than not. I agree, but on pain of protest. Bonnie, in about 5 seconds, I'm going to tear up these papers and move directly to the divorce. Jerry already has a set drawn up by his partner, so we can sign it right now. We split it 50-50 and go our separate ways. I don't want you to agree under protest. I want you to agree because you love me and realize I'm trying to protect our marriage and future. It's up to you. I said the magic words, and her eyes cleared. She was still sighing. I love you, sweetheart, and I'm grateful you let me do this. Will just has to understand. If the others want to, they can get together later. Get Jerry. We signed there and there and there, oh, and there too, and Jerry notarized it. She gave us each a copy and said she would put another one in a folder. That was the end of it, and we left. She didn't say a word all the way to the office. I just sat in the parking lot waiting for her to come out. You're not coming in? You're the office worker, honey, and I'm the loader, remember? The Parker project is way behind, and I need to meet with Jason to give him one last tour of his studio. He's like a kid at Christmas with a shiny new bike under the tree. I'll be outside the rest of the day stroking my ego. Don't cook today. Have Jules buy something on the way home. Anything but Chinese. She grinned. Jules would eat Chinese takeout 7 days a week if left to her own devices. Okay, sweetie. I love you. I kissed her on the lips. I love you too. Now get out of my truck. She giggled and stormed into the office. My smile faded as soon as she walked through the door. I prayed that this episode would end and we would go back to normal. I'd never been a gambler or a betting man, but I'd bet on it ending badly. Not in the best of moods, I lashed out at several subcontractors who were stalling, letting them know that I wasn't going to pay for delays, and if they didn't get their asses up, I wasn't going to use them anymore. It was an empty threat because the economy was good and construction was booming. Guys would work for a while, get pissed off about some real or imagined shortcoming, leave, and before the hour was up, take another job. These guys pulled up because I had used their services for years, and everyone remembered the worst of times when 1 or 2 jobs meant the difference between bankruptcy and solvency. Jason was really acting like a kid at Christmas. He loved his office, which was even more special because Annette had decorated it. She had hung gold and platinum albums along the wall, as well as photos from his band days, photos with the artists he had written songs for and produced. On a shelf behind his desk were 2 AMA awards and a Grammy. Earl's old Fender Precision and his vintage Les Paul stood in matching display cases. 2 amps, ready to go at the flick of a switch, and a stack of electronic keyboards. I let him have the bass because Earl needed to be memorized, and it wouldn't do him any good to have it lying in a case in the back bedroom. There were pictures of Earl, and also of me playing without cold over the years. Jason was the guitarist I'd filled in for to give him a break and recover a bit from the food poisoning. The project was giving me constant headaches. The electrical subcontractor nearly had a heart attack when he looked at the schematics and saw how much wiring was required for the recording studio. And my guys had a hard time with soundproofing and installing custom plexiglass partitions. The computer guys drove us crazy with their demands, but we still met the deadline. We managed to stay within budget and 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Jason and I stopped in front of the base case, looking at the almost life-sized picture of Earl. I wonder what Earl would say about our upcoming adventure. Well, first he'd laugh heartily, then he'd tell us all not to do it. I looked at Jason in surprise. Really? He shrugged. Indeed. In the 5 years we played without Cold, the lead singer was married and divorced twice, the drummer 4 times, counting the period before we joined, and Sammy went through a divorce that was pretty ugly, and then his girlfriend dumped him after 2 years because he couldn't keep it in his pants. The rock and roll lifestyle didn't exactly favor monogamy. A couple of his girlfriends tried to date him, but it got to be too much and they left. At least Earl was smart enough to observe and learn, and when he married Tammy, he had a prenup. And that's a good thing, because when he was on the road and she got lonely, she started getting boyfriends. When Earl confronted her, she just laughed and asked how many babes he spends his evenings with on an average tour. The thing is, Earl was really watching and learning, and he avoided any situation that might put him in a compromising position, which is what tripped her up in the divorce. She had no proof that he spent evenings out because he didn't. He had audio and videotapes of at least 2 guys and private investigator reports on 2 more. If the judge could have gotten away with giving her less than the agreement, I think he would have. Tammy realized she had screwed up big time and begged Earl to give her another chance, offering to sign another contract that said she would get absolutely nothing if she screwed up again. Earl just grinned, said "Great White" and walked away, sending her a link to their song, "Once Bitten, Twice Shy." I had to think about it for a moment. If it's all true, why are you doing this? Same as you. Net wants to do it, and I don't mind one last hurrah before we get old. We almost talked it to death and agreed on some basics. 1, if we like it, we'll continue in strict accordance with the rules. If either of us decides that once is enough, we'll end it for good. I told him what I had done, and he laughed heartily. I'd love to see Will's face when he found out he'd done all that work to get to Bonnie, and then it all went to shit. Is that what this is about? He got Bonnie? Yes, that and the fact that you don't like him. I don't know what happened in the past, but he really doesn't like you. It wasn't so much about Bonnie. It was more about him wanting to fuck you. Booger helped because he never got over the fact that you kicked him out of his band job. It took me by surprise. I couldn't remember a single incident that had made him hate me so much. I didn't kick Booger out. The band broke up. It's hard to need a sound guy if you're not playing anymore. He wasn't getting paid, so he didn't lose income. Jesus, that was 26 years ago. Will and I didn't really like each other, and I didn't like the way he treated Annette or his other girlfriends, but we got along. Why is he so angry with me? Jason grinned. It's simple. You caught the one that got away, the one he's had a crush on all these years. Plus, you got what you wanted. You're a successful businessman with your own company, and he's just a mid-level slave. I hear he's not a very gifted worker, and his job could be in jeopardy if he makes another mistake. An evening with Bonnie won't change anything. No, but it will boost his ego a lot, since he was with your wife, and she was more than agreeable. Now he's really going to hate you. All that coaxing and manipulation he did to create this situation, and then you ruined it. Grace won't be happy either. I think she had plans to switch you if the opportunity presented itself, and be there to pick you up on the slack. When it's over, I'll tell them not to come anymore. They are too destructive an element to keep them around. Everyone else feels the same way, except Booger. The fact that you do this will be the beginning of the end for them. While I wasn't relieved about what was to come, I was very relieved that we wouldn't have to interact with this couple anymore. The resort vacation seems to promise not only a well-deserved vacation, but also something more mysterious. The protagonist has taken on the responsibility of security, contracting with unconventional security systems that few people know about. The question is, what exactly does he expect to happen? The situation heats up as the day X approaches, and I remind you that our Patreon has already released the full version without any censorship, and believe me, it's very hot. You may be hot, and in their family, the first cracks in the relationship between the characters are already appearing. The protagonist is becoming more and more suspicious, and his decisive actions are causing resistance in the group. But what if there is more than just a desire to preserve order lurking beneath this cloak of security? We see personal motives and hidden agendas emerge. Jason may have his card up his sleeve, and Will seems to be pursuing his own interests. All of this creates a complex cocktail of intrigue that, when its cards are exposed, could turn the tide of marriage and relationships in this group. So, what happens next at this resort? What secrets are kept behind the scenes in preparation for the safe event? And what dark waters are we swimming in when passions rise to the surface? You'll hear all of this in the next exciting episode. Get ready for exciting plot twists and unexpected revelations that will make you question the price of safety and the real motives of the characters.